Hello, Ava. How are you?
I'm very good, Adrian. How are you going?
Good, thank you. It's good to see you and hear from you again, even though it's through the ones and zeros. It's still good. But these are
Yeah,
the
nice to
times
hear.
we find ourselves in with all that's going on. So it actually sort of provides an opportunity for a lot of us to actually do these sort of things that we don't normally have time to do. Um,
Absolutely.
so how have you been? How's things over the last, I guess, especially over the last week or two, given what you do and create with Spanda School as well? And your
Yeah,
teachers.
yeah, like I was saying just before we hopped on, last week was really devastating for me. Um, in a very short time frame, I had to close down my studio and the doors of our center, and I was devastated that everything I had poured all my energy into for the past 4 years since we spoke last. It was all the fate was just taken right out of my hands, and and I just put so much energy into building it. And you know how business works, you plan it in a certain way to achieve certain outcomes, and that the doors just had to shut. So it was really hard last week, and I found myself in a grieving process for everything I had just lost, but also needing to start up an entirely new business within a couple of days, because I still had all the staff, all the teachers, all the systems of a studio, but that was no longer running. But I didn't want to just close everything down and fire everyone and fire our clients who were still relying on us for yoga and meditation and the special practices that we offer. So very quickly did I have to start an online yoga studio, and the tech and the systems and stuff. It took so long to build the brick and mortar, and to have to switch it over to an online studio in the matter of a couple of days, with the tech and the craziness, and while trying to grieve the studio was intense. So last week was really intense, as it is, just with business in general. But this week, having landed all of that and catching my breath again and coming back to myself and seeing the opportunity at hand, I am amazing this week and have had an incredible week. And so was last week also a powerful week.
Sure.
But I was just telling everyone, it's the same shit, just a different pile. When it came to last week, it's the same stuff. It's the tech, it's the systems, it's the staff, like all of the things that you have to work with normally. So it was just a different circumstance, but the same. It just seems like that's what that business entails. It's a lot of work to run a business like that. So it was really difficult being thrown that curveball.
Yeah.
But now I have a bit more space to relax.
Sure. Yeah. And did you have any sort of online platform set up before this? Like, I know you have your social media and things like that, but did you have anything in regards to practices and training that before?
Yeah, so I had absolutely nothing except just a week or two prior to that, we released a podcast. So that was the only way that I could still reach people, but everything else was face to face. So all of our retreats got canceled. And then, of course, the studio, maybe a week later, had to shut its doors.
Yeah, yeah. What's the podcast, or what's the name of the podcast?
The name of the podcast is Functional Spirituality.
Okay, cool. Yeah, nice. Yeah. Which is I love that term, right? Because it's the word functional when it comes to spirituality and the esoteric, it can be quite often sort of left out or forgotten about, or not really. I think even people really find it hard to even understand what that might be, what functional.
To reconcile them. Yeah.
To reconcile them. That's right. Yeah, exactly. So, so that's an important thing to be able to teach and learn, because it's such an important facet of this human experience.
Absolutely. I have a question, being a brand new podcaster and just starting that up for you. What does functional spirituality mean to you? Sorry to hijack.
Yeah, that's a good question. Functional, to me, it's like putting into practice in a practical manner the lessons that have been learned. And right now, Ava, with what's going on with this COVID-19, this is the time to be practicing that, to have that functional spirituality and not sort of just be in the ether with it. It's time to be practical. It's time to be pragmatic. So yeah, I guess something like that. Yeah,
absolutely. That's exactly what I think as well.
Yeah, so you wrote a really good post on, I believe it was a fantastic post, and a lot of other people did a few days ago, just in regards to sort of some of the ways that the powers that be have responded, and where we're at with it as well as individuals. But the focus of your post is very much about that inner journey and focusing on the self and understanding. I think this provides an opportunity. What's been going on in the last couple of weeks provides an opportunity to be aware of the systems that are in place in this world, and how they perhaps don't work for the individual and society as well. I thought your post put it in a very effective manner that despite all that, this is a fantastic opportunity for us all to, instead of sort of seeking answers on the outside and trying to find and resolve issues on the outside, that this is the time to bring it in and to really understand, what's going on with us. So, yeah, is that something you can speak to a little bit about? What sort of drove you to write that post, I should say, and sort of some intention behind it?
Sure, definitely, I can share. So when I wrote that post, it was in the middle of me being really frustrated, trying to navigate my business, trying to, when you're running business and you're, a leader of that particular community and you're representing your community. I was really struggling with finding knowledge and information so that I can navigate and act and represent our collective values as I do, in many ways, and being the face of what we all value if you're a part of this community. And I was just like, what is going on? Why can't I find any answers? And I was really happy to just follow what the government was saying, with the health.gov. But then I started to get a lot of conflicting messages, and I would like to just say, everything else is just gossip and stuff, what is happening on social media and what people are saying and other publications are saying, but just stick to the government websites and you'll find like the most up-to-date knowledge. But then there's so much conflicting information about that they're lying or concealing information, and that they have their own agendas. And it's just, I think the post was very ranty and opinionated. And yeah, as I like to write in that opinionated way. Just to share honestly about where I was at in that moment, which was that I felt lost, and I felt like, and all that really clarified for me though, was that we have to be our own government. We can't rely on, I wish we could, and I think that would be a brilliant way for the world to run, is if we could rely on valuable sources of information. But even, and that's the whole point of what I share in functional spirituality, and also the kind of offerings I have, is that even in spirituality, even the most best meaning people are not always valuable sources of information. And, it's a dangerous territory to go be making value statements about what people are saying and people's ideas and stuff to say, oh, that's more valuable than another. When we're talking about spirituality, you should be a bit more PC and be like, no, everyone's own path and their own journey, and they've all got their own opinions and they're all equally valuable. However, I don't believe that they're equally valuable in terms of like the value is determined in relation to the outcome that that you're aiming for, so they're all relevant.
Yeah.
They're all valid.
Yeah.
Inherently and absolutely, they have their own validity as being, part of the reality, and they exist, and that's for sure. But on a relative level, some information is supposed to be describing and leading you to a particular outcome, and we need to have a bit more discernment to say if it's actually valuable for that particular outcome, which is a little bit of a side note. But yeah, I just felt like we don't have we don't have good sources of information, and I would love there to be the powers that be really do have our best interest in heart, but that's also such a big ask. You know, the population is so varied, and it's hard to lead all people. You know, they're just trying to lead, and they're passionate, and they know the government, they know what they're doing for themselves and for the people that they represent that are aligned with them, you know, but that may not be all of us. And then you're trying to get information. So it was a really hard week. I felt, and then, as you said, that it kind of led into this idea about we need to be our own government. It's only highlighting to us that at this time, there's so much information, but we can't really unconsciously subscribe to anyone's ideas and anyone's information from the outside blindly without checking how it is valuable for ourselves.
That's where the discernment is an important aspect of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a huge part of it.
That's something you've spoken about quite often, is individual discernment and that ability to, like you said, you know, these different avenues of information that are available to us now, and different modalities of whatever it might be, different practices or whatever it may be, not just in the in the new age world, but, you know, in finance,
absolutely,
sports, whatever it might be. Like the discernment aspect of it, where an individual can have an awareness of sifting through the bullshit, I guess is a good way to put it. I think it's not really something that it takes training, right? I believe it takes training. It's like a muscle in the brain to develop and to keep at an optimal level. But it's not something we ever really are taught. We're sort of taught just to go along with the flow and do what we're told, and not really think for ourselves, which is okay in the times of peace and wellness. But when things start to go a little bit airy, then you know, it's a recipe for disaster. Well, not disaster, but it makes things a lot harder anyway.
Yeah. I think that's a really great way to put it, that there is a development there, or a training of discernment. Obviously, like a muscle, you said, we know that discernment is a quality, you know, we can develop it, but, you know, how do you sift through the bullshit, like you said? And I think for me, discernment, again, it's not about making value statements about what is right and what is wrong. But I think discernment, the reason we're not taught it, like you said, I think discernment, it seems like a yang quality, like it seems like something that should be really respected and valued, and we should be trained for in this yang world that we live in. But I don't actually think it's a yang quality. I think it's more of a yin introspective quality. And I think discernment isn't about being the smartest or the most judgmental and critical across all fronts, which I know those qualities, you know, intimately. But I think being discerning is really about going inward and checking out and refining your intentions. So if you don't know what your intentions are, you don't know what you're moving forward with, you don't know what your purpose is, what your desires are, what you're trying to get out of a situation, I think as soon as those are clarified, that is discernment in some ways. Like that opens up the capacity to discern or to sense the vibrational alignment or anything like that. That is a skill, but it's rooted in awareness and purpose and connection to maybe some of those more introspective qualities. And no, I don't think we're trained for that at all, you know?
Yeah, I guess it's like a harmonization or resonance then, isn't it? Like that self-awareness that you're speaking about through the discernment, then we're able to then understand it in our outside world as well. But if we haven't first done that, we'll develop that understanding within ourselves. It's very hard to do that. That's why I think a lot of people that you see who are what's the word? When a con man comes along and, you know, cons someone, usually it's they can identify the person that they're going to play this out on, because like that, it would be a gullible personality. So, you know, and then, yeah, it'd be great to have like the government that's there at our best interest to like help, protect us from that and support us for that. But I think a lot of the times we get the distinction about what our government is supposed to be there doing for us versus personal responsibility. And it's just interesting at the moment how there's a big shakeup of that where, for as long as we've known, certainly, that, the government is there to support us and have these systems in place during times of whatever it may be, good and bad. But now at the moment, we're in a novel period of time. Like we've never experienced something like this in the world before. And our governments are scrambling, us as individuals are scrambling. And I think we're trying to like work out what to do, like how to move through this process. But that's why I really respected and really enjoyed your post, was because it was more about, well, hang on, let's just look at what we can do individually in that inner journey and then look at it from there rather than sort of demand something from the outside, be it government
Definitely.
or support services. So, I mean, what are some ways do you feel like do you feel like as you're sort of progressing with that, and especially leading up to say 2 or 3 weeks ago, your abilities for discernment, I want to just keep going with the discernment thing a little bit, if that's okay, because it's something I'm very interested in. Do you feel like, what were some of the practices that you have or had that sort of helped in your abilities with that, and to bring it more back into that yin aspect of it as well that you spoke about?
Yeah, to be honest, it's in many ways one of those things that if you've cultivated that connection and that capacity for introspection, it's going to have a better chance of showing up when you need it. Because to call on something that you haven't developed when you really, really need it, it's very difficult, as we know. Why does it not, when you need to come out of that storm? So there were a lot of storms, in the past couple of weeks. So in those moments, when it comes to what did I call upon for myself in personal practices and stuff, it would be the same things that I do to fill my cup, as people say, of things that nourish me and relax me. So there were a lot of baths, a lot of yoga, a lot of journaling, a lot of, I like to retreat a lot, and just, kind of shut out that noise, because the reality is that there were storms in this uncharted territory, and there was nothing that I could do to kind of go through it except to nourish myself with those tools that that put me into that place of being introspective and discerning. So then the discernment came, after a little bit of the storm, and the discernment that arose was, you don't need to validate your own, you said harmony, like I don't have to validate my own experience and what I'm going through and what I believe and what I need to do next solely based on the information that's coming from the outside. It's really hard. It was really easy to try to abnegate myself and my own vision and my messaging and my values and how I represent my community. I started to feel this pressure to abnegate it, to follow what everyone else was doing. Huge shaming and pressure from like society, and then the government is saying some other scary things, then they're saying some good things, and there's all kinds of it's a big soup of opinions and worries and people pushing their ideas on others, agendas, 100%. And then there's me doing the exact same thing, which is we're all just doing that, it's a soup of everyone pushing their agendas, and it kind of was really bubbling up. And then at some point when I wrote the post, I was upset in hindsight, looking like, why haven't I had any support from our government? But also, we are our own government. We need to be in touch with the people. The people are all of the values, the missions, the sensitivities, the traumas, the strengths, the relationships of this experience or colony or whatever I am, and I have to be my own government and be just and interested and listening. And as you can see from our government, which I guess I'm not really in touch with politics and stuff, but seeing how they've gone through everything and how much they've tried to support the people, I have respect for our government. I'm sure people would hate me saying that, but I have respect for what they do and their efforts to do the impossible, which is to govern like a country. Yeah, I don't know how it actually all works.
Sure.
I mean, we learned in school and stuff, but I don't remember. But yeah, it's a big task to ask from other people, and it's something that we actually have to be willing to do for ourselves instead of just hoping someone else will give us all of the answers. I think the society we live in, potentially the best recipe would be to have a balance between both, to be present and listening to what is externally being offered to us and governing from the outside and inner governing.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And this time we're in now provides an opportunity for people to really develop that and necessity. Like, necessity is the mother of invention, and it'd be interesting to see what sort of systems come out from this time, and the ways of doing business and the ways of communicating with our tribe and the ways of governing, because we're in times that are unprecedented. And it's also providing a real opportunity for those of us. I was talking to a friend of mine last night about, all the sort of practice that a lot of people around the world have been putting in the last 5 to 10 years around their own inner world and their own journey. It's providing a platform to actually do that now. Another friend of mine calls it like it's a period of the dark night of the soul, which is sort of one aspect of it, but it's certainly, when you think about the amount of individuals who, for the first time in their life, are going to actually have to be with themselves, potentially the first time ever, with minimal distractions and no work, no school, being amongst their family or whatever it might be, it really is a fantastic opportunity to do something. But the outcomes of which is really going to be determined by, I feel like, us as the individual. And the role that our government, we're sort of talking about the government people binary here, but the role that government and the individual plays moving forward, it's just going to be interesting to see like how that works out. And especially for someone who owns a business like you, who runs a business like yourself, where you're the mediator between the two, between the individual and the government in a way. You've got such a powerful position at the moment to really do things in a positive manner. And that's why I think it's fantastic that people like yourself are putting your voice out there and talking about it and discussing about some of the things that might go unspoken as well. Do you think there's, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I don't know if I wrote that in my post, but I totally agree with that. If you're running a business, somehow you're representing the people, but you're also really closely connected to the government somehow. So I felt challenged in that position with the accountability there to be making these huge decisions for the business and trying to, filter out what the government was saying about what needed to happen, which, as you know, was very ambiguous. Never at one stage did they say you have to shut down your yoga studio.
You just that on your own? Like, was that your decision to do that, or?
Well, he was kind of, the Prime Minister was kind of saying, read between the lines and see if you fit into these categories of businesses that are allowed and are not allowed to function.
Yeah.
So no, I don't.
Between essential and non-essential, is that right?
Well, non-essential, of course. I don't think so, but of course we're not an essential business. But before that, when they were shutting down gyms and other like fitness-based businesses, and of course I don't consider myself to be an indoor gym or indoor sporting venue, but the lines are blurred, and it's the individual businesses were feeling a lot of pressure to close down. And I'm happy we did, but there's not clear direction coming, and it's really hard. It was hard for me to shut the doors, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure it was. I mean, it's your baby, right? This is your creation and something that you've nurtured and
With no plan to reopen, you know?
Yeah, well, that was my next question, right? So what is the, I mean, I'll ask the question, but you may not have an answer yet, but what is the short-term sort of prognosis or vision, or, you know, what's your thoughts at the moment in regards to that?
Well, I hope that Spunda would reopen. But at the moment, we have to pay rent, full rent. And I haven't cut down my team of teachers. We've transitioned our entire studio to online. But the revenue sources for the business have become maybe a quarter.
Right.
With the same expenses, bar like a couple of small things. Like we have the cleaner coming in, obviously not 3 times a week anymore, once a fortnight. So would we reopen? It will be a question when the time comes, really, about when that time is and what is happening. I mean, it's only been less than 2 weeks of us being closed. Like I'm only starting to land in the fact of this is closed down now. And like I said, I'm feeling very happy, very relaxed. I'll take any opportunity to retreat and shut down things. So I'm happy. And like I mentioned before, I also have time to work on the projects that I personally offer and facilitate that are not the yoga studio that I normally have to work on at the same time as running that business. And to have that off my plate and to be, because now Spunda School doesn't run anymore. It only has one offering, live stream yoga.
Okay.
And that's kind of, it took a big push to make sure that was all sorted and really good. And now that's up and running and I can just participate in the classes and give my classes. And that's kind of sorted. I can't build that business anymore. So I can focus more on my other businesses, which is I'm very happy to do that. But it hasn't even been a month yet. And I reckon we're in this for a couple of months, which is just amazing to think.
Yeah.
It's amazing to think that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as far as timelines go, I agree. I think it's going to be at least a couple of months. So we've started, in my job, we started working from home last week and there's no clear indication about when we may return. So it's going to be interesting, but it's okay for me who's on a salary and I know that's some sort of quite confident there's going to be the income there. But for business owners, it's a little bit different. I understand that there are government assistance areas out there as well, which does help. So, but it's how long can we do that for? How long as a society can we keep that going? And then what are going to be the ramifications of that debt that we're sort of taking out at the moment as well? So I guess that's one of the other big things, isn't it? That we're going to really, it's going to provide an opportunity to reassess commerce and our economy. And I mean, really in a healthy economy, we wouldn't be having this. We'd have some sort of fund that was there to mitigate these things, or we'd, but we're so heavily into credit, we're so heavily into borrowing that there is no safety net. Even our social services are really all just based off some sort of credit system that the government has to undertake. So you'd hope, and my hope, or it is a hope that we'll come out of this and we'll have a better sort of view on what our economy is. Yeah. I mean, what are some things do you feel like could have, is there anything that you feel could have helped you as a business in these last 2 weeks that wasn't done? Like, is there anything you felt like would have been worthwhile? Have you had a chance to have a think about that? Or has it been, obviously it's been a busy time for you, but.
In terms of what I've put into place or what the government has put into place?
Yeah, the government assistance that is there. Like
just the knowledge, just having a clear access to information and guidance from the top. And there's been a lot of really nice guidance about the Australian, that Australia is in a good position and Australia is supported, and the government is passionate and feels really strongly about supporting the businesses. That's all been beautiful. I felt really supported, but having really clear information. And to be honest, there's so much of the information that has given me the idea that the government isn't being clear is just also hearsay, So I think some people really, as you know, really struggle and get sucked into the ideas about the government is trying to kill us and poison us. And it's such a terrifying experience to live inside those conspiracies of the government has done this for this reason. And then there's that problem. And that can be really bad. But even just the smallest bit of that, like the government's not entirely honest with the amount of testing or the amount of money or how prepared it is. Even that was probably the most difficulty I went through, to be like, hey, look, there's conflicting information.
Yes.
Which is fair enough. I don't know what's true. It could be 100% the government is an evil alien race and 100% the government is having the people's interests at their highest priority,
Sure.
I believe that is equally as possible to the conspiracies that are out there.
Yeah.
But I don't have a strong, reputable source of knowing about either of those things. The knowledge is too far away.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's been an interesting one. You're right, Ava. I think the sort of outcomes, I think a lot of it's wrapped up in this psychology of people not being in control. Like in the same manner that there was a run on toilet paper, that it sort of brings into focus or gives people like an understanding of what's going on, because perhaps for the first time in their life, they don't feel like they're in control. So it's easy to say, well, it's a conspiracy, and people are wrapping up, 5G with coronavirus, and they're starting to make these sort of links and patterns and trying to find ways to bring some sort of, I guess, sense to what's going on. Where, I get it, but I feel would do the same about it as well. Like a much better way to use our energy is by just focusing on what we can do as individuals and as a collective.
So powerless otherwise.
Exactly.
I 100% agree with that. Yeah. Completely disempowering.
Yeah, we are, and that sort of plays to the hand of those who would want to, get one over us. But if we can sort of focus more on, and that's what that's been one of the things that I've been, I wouldn't say upset about, but just sort of the leanings into like the conspiracy aspect of it and all this. That okay, I get it. I can understand why people would think that way, and potentially, maybe like you said, maybe that is a factor that's going on, but I don't know. And certainly no one I know who's talking about these things would know either. So in the meantime, let's sort of focus on things that are more constructive and things that are going to really assist us in the future moving forward.
Yeah, and that just feels right. You don't know, and you could easily argue and say that kind of thinking is what gets us into the first, like if you're being passive, then you're facilitating this, people are controlling us, and it just feels better to do what you said, Both could be true. You could argue for both cases, but I guess you just kind of have to feel into what feels sweeter, for your own experience.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's a lot less anxiety inducing when you can just sort of focus on yourself and focus on your family and friends, and rather than, and creating. Like, I think this is an amazing opportunity too. Like you said, you've now got an opportunity to create some things that you've had in the background there and haven't had time to do. I know a few other people doing the same, and a lot of it's sort of technology based around, different courses and whatever it may be. But, you could be an artist, or you could be someone who likes to tinker with cars or whatever it might be. Like, it provides an amazing opportunity now to do something with that. And yeah, we do have an incredible opportunity here to create something very novel that can help us as a society moving forward. I just hope we don't get lost in a sort of us versus them mentality, which comes into it by a lot of the conspiracy type folks, of which there seems to be so many out there. That us against them mentality is very dangerous.
Yeah. And I wanted to speak about, I mean, because you mentioned, a lot of people are mentioning, and you mentioned back to my post about how I might have alluded to it, that this is a time for spiritual practice. This is a time to bring in the functional spirituality and to apply it and to discern and evaluate our motivations and say, now more than ever, am I just, breathing in this way and moving my hands or doing this and that because I was told to, or because I really evaluated what is the outcome that I want? I think in spirituality, people are so averse to goals. They don't want there to be a goal. They don't want there to be a result.
Sure.
But you really need to wake up and realize that you're doing it for a result. Get clear on the result that are you trying to become wealthy? Are you trying to become happy? Are you trying to heal something? Like, what is the result that you're doing these practices and investing your time and energy for? It's not, if the result is to increase your level of faith and surrender, that is a result. So you have to get clear and not confuse that all spiritual practice needs to have as its main praxis faith and surrender, that, oh, whatever is supposed to happen will happen. It's like, no, get clear on your results, refine your motivations, become discerning by investigating inwardly, what do I actually want to do and what do I want to get from all of this, and do that functional spirituality. But I think that the reason that everyone is saying why this is a special time for spiritual practice, but I think without it, then I'm just not into the fluff about it all, like maybe it's because of an astrological significance or because it's the time of collective awakening on the planet. This happens every couple of years, that it's the time of the collective awakening and Redemption Day and everything on the planet. It's happening all the time. But what I honestly believe on just a more practical, simple level, there's a disruption, there's a disruption in our day-to-day living. That's all it is. Things have been disrupted. And as soon as things are disrupted like that, there's a pause, and that one foot in front of the other, stepping forward, linear in time, achievement-based living that we're normally doing in our patriarchal kind of yang normal way of operating. As soon as there's a disruption to that, there is a gap and an opening and a portal back into refining our motivations and back into kind of spiritual practice and introspection. So I don't think it's a significant time in any way, except that it's obviously a significant time. The entire planet has been disrupted. So I'd say that there'd be values on it on two levels. One is on a personal level. Your personal life has been disrupted and you've got more space and time to reflect. But then there's something special where the whole collective has been disrupted. And somehow that is going to support us, and not even on a really practical way. How has the disruption of the whole collective's operation, how is it affecting us? Well, we have more permission to stop because everyone's stopping. There's a huge permission that's opened up to slow down, to reflect, to unplug. To not be called to show up automatically like a fucking robot for duty, like continuously the thing. Like there's, we have permission to slow down, and that is so wide scale at the moment. Like there's a lot of other things that are wild scale on the planet, the uncertainty, the doubt, the scarcity, that's also widespread. But that's kind of the normal collective, but there's something else that's opened up in the collective, and a yearning for connection and an increased self-awareness on some level. So I think this is a potent and significant time for spiritual practice for sure. Just on a practical level, things have been disrupted.
Yeah. I mean, when you speak about practical, like the idea of first principles, it's very much a physics type fundamentalist understanding of like just bringing in and understanding from a base level what it's all about. Like what is it, the intention that you have and the goals that you have, like you spoke to. I think it's a very important point. And I feel like what could happen here is that a lot of the teachings that we've seen in the past that aren't rooted in some sort of practicality or aren't grounded in themselves. And, you have like, the typical Instagram personality who, is posting every day, saying the same thing, just using different words, and there's no real substance behind it. I really feel like those sort of people are going to be seen for, it's going to be seen for what it is. We're going to, because we're very much more into our intuition, much more into our into our emotional body. We're not caught up in that striving and, you know, earning $20,000 in 1 week, you know, all that sort of, you know, hoopla, which is just a big sales gimmick. I trust that this is going to be the opportunity to understand that, okay, this is a particular type of message that isn't really practical in my life or for anyone else around me. And through discernment, I'll be able to work out what practices and what teachings are out there that actually are going to help me during this time when I've got to worry about putting food on the table and having a roof over my head for my family. What is it that is actually practical, and what is going to, out of these spiritual teachings, these esoteric teachings, it is going to work? Because I think a lot of the fluff that we see on Instagram, I keep thinking of Instagram, but it seems to be more where it is. It's just not practical. It's just not, it can be inspiring, and I think that's great, but some of the lessons that people may want to impart on there and that people get caught up in are going to be seen for what they are, which is sort of lacking substance.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with all that, you know, and I think for me, where I become a little bit more niche in my thinking is that at least that is, you know, on the Instagram and stuff, at least it's just superficial. And I think everyone can, like you said, their intuition can sense, and maybe it's heightened now, but their intuition can sense like, oh, okay, that's not really providing me too much depth. But I think where it gets really sticky and difficult is with the spiritual practice. And there is substance there. However, I don't know if you're familiar with the Buddhist term near enemies. So the ones that are so close, they sound so true. Those are the ones, those are the systems, the teachings that are the most dangerous, because they're so, they resonate and they light us up, yet they might not be productive, practical, or functional in any way. They may not change the way that you function. They may re-traumatize you. And that's the whole thing with all of the spiritual cults and the gurus and all of these things. It's a spirituality is an absolute minefield of near enemies. So teachings and practices that make our heart open, that make us feel energized, that maybe give us an ego boost or false sense of accomplishment, like things that energize us, but are actually, they're not aligning us towards spirituality, which might be a realization of an identity beyond our ego, you know, and an integration of that. So if our spiritual practice is about alternative realities and energies and all of these experienced by the ego, there is so much spirituality out there. It's not funny. But if spirituality is about a realization of what we are as conscious spirit, there's not very many things that either even touch on that, never mind fully embody and integrate that, you know? So there may be speakings about that, but actually having a system and a practice that's simple, no fluff, and it's just about recognizing and integrating that awareness and that consciousness. I don't think I think that's the hardest part and my passion to navigate, because I've just been through so much stuff, you know. I've been through so many systems, so many cults, so many schools, so many teachers, so many peak experiences of all these different kinds, and to now having spent so long doing that, and now to say, okay, which ones actually worked and which ones, what can I dispel with, and pick it up out of interest's sake and for the experience of it, because they're all valid in themselves, but they're not actually valuable with this particular outcome and motivation that I have, which is an integration of a deep, infinite peace that's inside into my daily life. I'm pretty clear about that being my goal. So it's crystal clear. The discernment is automatic, whether a practice aligns with that or not.
Yeah.
So I really love what you said, that people's intuitions are naturally going to be heightened in this period. And I didn't even think about that, but just because of that, there's going to be a shift and a connection to their spiritual practice if they've already got one in a new way.
Yeah, definitely amplification of their bullshit meter. And, and that's something I really love and respect about you, Ava, just the way you go about it. And just that thing of just keeping it real, like the way you speak to your practice and the way you speak to your teachings. It's just very clear, concise, and there's a reality to it. It's fundamental. And that's what I love about what you do. So it's fantastic that you can do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think that might be a great way to wrap up the podcast. A good note to finish on. I think what you just spoke to there was some things that can really assist people and help people to navigate this little space that we're in now and also into the future. What are some ways that people can find out about you, Ava, and Span the School as well? And how can they get a hold of you if they'd like to?
Well, if it still exists, so you may.
It will.
I mean, it does exist right now. So we spoke on this podcast 4 years ago about Spanda School. So SPANDA School is the name of the center that I run. And now it has a full yoga studio timetable, but all being live streamed. So you're welcome to check that out at spandaschool.com. In about a week's time, so we're early April now, so maybe in about a week's time, I'll launch my website, which will be avairani.org. And on there, you'll have more access just about who I am and the offerings that I'm developing, which are yoga and meditation based teacher training and mentoring programs, but completely different from almost a response to the aspects of yoga teaching and meditation that are maybe leading people a little bit astray in a lot of Sanskrit and complications and things that have come from gurus that we might not actually want to replicate. So it's really a response to that. So definitely the retreats and teacher training programs that I offer would be a nice way to connect to what I share. But of course, Functional Spirituality is the name of the new podcast.
Cool.
We'll have to get you on there one time for a conversation and pay you back double. And yeah, I'll actually be starting a live stream free meditation every Monday morning held inside the Functional Spirituality Facebook group. So there's a couple of ways of finding me. And on Instagram as well. You can definitely check out the photos of me.
Cool. Nice one.
And the things.
Yeah. So Span the School, Functional Spirituality, and you'll have your own website up in about a week's time. I'll put the links up in underneath here as well, people. You can go check it out. Yeah, have a look and find out about what Ava does. Thank you very much for doing this. I understand, it's a high pressure time, but also on the flip side of that, it's also quite a time to so yeah, I appreciate you making the time and having a chat today. It's great.
Yeah, it's been lovely chatting. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah, you're more than welcome anytime, and enjoy the rest of your day. And yeah, we'll speak again.
Okay.
Sometime
Chat soon.
See ya.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.